So, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, United States of America. My mother and father were Italians and owned a very famous Italian restaurant in Chicago. When I was a young boy, I always had affection for Jesus. So as I got older, my search for the truth increased many times. And my father had just bought a farm north of Chicago in the country. So I was 17 years old, and I had one dog, a Doberman Pinscher. He was my best friend. So I bought one tent, and I moved into the deep part of the forest near Lake Zurich, Illinois. And I was praying to Lord Jesus Christ, please tell me the truth of life. Who is your Father? So many people say so many things. This church, that church, born again Christians, this, that, so many different views and opinions. And none of them satisfied the questions I was asking. So I was very frustrated, and I was thinking of joining the United States Marine Corps, which are fierce fighters, American Army. And because my father, my uncles, my brothers were all Marines. And at that time, the Vietnam War was still raging. So I went back to our little farmhouse. I left my tent, and I told my father I was thinking of joining the Marine Corps because I was frustrated with everything. And I'm only 17 years old at this time. So my father pleaded with me, please don't join the Marine Corps. This war is not a war worth fighting. This is a war of politicians. I don't want to see my son die in a war like this. So with tears in his eyes, he was begging me not to join the Marine Corps. So back to the forest I went, and I'm praying to Jesus. So one day I was hiking with my dog in the middle of the forest, and I was tired, so I sat down by a tree to rest. And I looked over, and my dog was maybe 20 yards away by another tree, and he was sniffing very intently and kind of hopping around. So I thought maybe it was a dead rabbit or a rabbit hole or something. So I got up to go and look, and when I looked down, I looked right at Srila Prabhupada. There was a Krishna book laying in the forest, and to this day, I have no idea how it got there. But I picked it up. It was in perfect condition, and this was October, early October of 1972. And it was in perfect condition, trilogy, and it was just Prabhupada's Transcendental Head, and was on the back cover. So I was looking at Srila Prabhupada with his beautiful tilak and his beautiful face, and I was thinking, what an amazing person. And in my heart, I knew that this was my spiritual master. And then I turned the book over, and it said Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I was thinking, what is this? So I started to read whatever I could read. A lot of the names of devotees, Sanskrit names and different words I couldn't pronounce. But whatever I could read, I kept reading and reading and reading. And every question that I had from the past or from questions that came into my mind, Srila Prabhupada would answer them. And it was a very kind of mystical experience. So I was looking through it a little closer, and I started in the beginning, and I saw words from George Harrison, the ex-Beatle, great Krishna Bhakta. And it said, everybody is looking for Krishna, Some don't realize that they are, but they are. And all the words by George Harrison. And at the end it said, so chant these names of God and you will attain God consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So it made complete sense to me. Finally something that made a little sense. So I started to chant. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I wasn't saying Hare Krishna, I was saying more like Hare Krishna. So, but the effect was there. And Krishna came in a very powerful way. I was very experiencing ecstatic bliss, Everything was animated and blissful. I was feeling very happy. So I was chanting, and then I was thinking I have to tell some of my friends about this. And, but most of them didn't understand. They thought I was a little crazy. Except one friend of mine who became my godbrother, Srikara. He was initiated by Srila Prabhupada. He was a famous hippie in those days. He had long hair and he would sing, play guitar very nicely. But we would talk about spiritual things. He had different books like Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Kabbalah and stuff like that. And I went to him and I said, Tracy, his name was Tracy. I said, all these things we talk about, all these spiritual things, I said, this is what we're looking for. And I showed him the Krishna book. I said, all the answers are in here. And he said, let me have it. I want to read it. And I said, no, I wouldn't give it to him because I didn't know where it came from and I didn't want to let that book out of my sight. But I read him a few things. And then I left. And I was chanting actually until March of 1973. So it was 5 or 6 months I was chanting Hare Krishna. And I never knew there was a Hare Krishna movement. I never knew there were devotees. I never knew anything. Because in that Krishna book, there was no information in the back about temples or anything like that. I remember that George Harrison mentioned Bhagavad Gita in his introduction. And so I knew there was another book somewhere, but there was no internet at that time. Nowhere to look it up or anything like that. So anyway, my father gave me one car, an old car. He said, if this car starts, the man who we bought this farm from left it here, and he gave me the papers, and he said, if it starts, you can have it. So I put a new battery in, and it started right up. It was an old Pontiac Tempest. I'll never forget it, blue. So I had a car, and I had just gotten my driver's license. So I would get in my car, and I would just drive and chant Hare Krishna. I would drive with my dog, because he couldn't talk back. He had to listen. So I would drive into northern Illinois, into Wisconsin, all the way up into northern America, into Minnesota, and just drive for days and weeks, just chanting. My father was very kind, and he would give me money. So I was really in ecstasy. And so when I would come back, I would try to still talk to some of my friends about it, but none of them could understand. So I went to see Srikar again, Tracy, and he was gone. His friends said that he went to somewhere. He went to Atlanta or somewhere like that. So here I am alone. So I spent that whole fall, winter, and beginning of spring chanting Hare Krishna. So in March or beginning of April of 1973, I went to visit some friends again. And when I came in, one of them said, hey, Tom, my name was Thomas. They used to call me Tom. Hey, Tom, you know that Krishna stuff you're into? And I was very defensive. If anybody said anything bad about Krishna, I was ready to fight, So I said, yeah, what about it? And he said, take it easy, He said, I want to show you something. And he went and he had a bag. He was shopping in Chicago. And he pulled out a big hardbound Krishna book, the big silver Krishna book. And I was like, wow, where did you get that? And he said, these bald-headed guys are passing them out at the mall in Chicago. And he goes, I said, bald-headed guys? He goes, yeah, I think they were Buddhist monks or something. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. So, and he goes, yeah, they have a temple in Evanston, which is the first town just north of Chicago. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And he gave me the card to the temple. So the first thing I did, he said they have a Sunday feast, and it was during the middle of the week, whatever day it was, Wednesday or Thursday or something. But I drove right to the temple the next morning, and my godbrother Chakri Prabhu opened the door. I knocked on the door, and he said, Hari Bol? And I said, well, you know, I've been chanting Hare Krishna for 6 months, and I just found out there was a temple. And Chakri's an amazing kind of devotee. He's kind of like an avadut. And he said, well, we'll come upstairs. We're having prasadam. And I said, what's prasadam? He said, it's food we offer to Krishna, vegetarian food. And I said, okay, I'm kind of hungry. So I went up, and they were serving out on wax paper on the floor this amazing khichdi, which was cooked by a devotee named Nischinta Prabhu, and halava. I'll never forget, it was strawberry halava. And I come from an Italian family of restaurateurs, some of the greatest cooks, Italian cooks, and I've never tasted anything like this prasadam in my life. It was just an incredible experience eating prasadam. And I was eating like mounds of halava and khichdi, and I was in ecstasy. And then one devotee, Chandrasekhar Prabhu, who does the prison ministry now in America, wonderful devotee, my dear friend and godbrother, he took me down. He said, come with me, after we took prasad. And he took me down to Tulsi Devi's room. And he was reading Krishna book to me. I had my Krishna book with me. So he started reading it to me. And the way he was reading it, and pronouncing all the words and everything so beautifully, I was floating just in an ocean of like complete transcendental happiness. And then Sri Govinda, who was the temple president at that time, my first temple president, he kind of popped his head in the door, and he said, and Chandrasekhar introduced me to him, and he told him how I came to Krishna Consciousness, that I had found the Krishna book with my dog. And he was like, wow. And he said, come to my office after you talk with Chandrasekhar, come to my office. And I said, okay. And I remember him telling Chandrasekhar, he said, I don't think you have to preach to him very much. He looks like he's a done deal. So I went to Sri Govinda's office, and he said, we were talking, and he said, tonight we're going on Sankirtan. Would you like to come on Sankirtan? And I had long hair, like black, really black curly hair down to my waist. It was really long. And now I'm 18 years old. April is 73. I just turned 18 in March. So I said, sure, what's Sankirtan? He said, we're going to go down to a concert downtown Chicago. We're going to pass out. We're going to sell Srila Prabhupada's Back to Godhead magazine and different books. I said, sure, I'll go. No problem. Let's do it. So we went down there, and I kind of watched the devotees for a minute. It was kind of on-the-spot training. The cars would come in and park, and then the devotees would go, roll your window down, and the person would roll his window down, and we'd give him a stick of spiritual sky incense. And they would grab the incense, and then they'd give him a book, BTG, and get a donation, like that. So, I watched a little for a few minutes, and then, to me it was nothing, and I was always used to being around people because I grew up in a very busy restaurant. So that first night on Sankirtan, I did over 50 BTGs, and I was really feeling ecstatic. I never felt anything quite like the internal happiness and bliss as distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. It was something quite amazing. So after that night, I was addicted to book distribution. So I didn't join right away because I was trying to save some of my friends. I'd go back, and my father had told me to get a job. he would give me money, but he said, I think it's time that you should go get a job and work. And I said, okay. So I had a job, and I was at this factory, and I would bore out airplane parts. They had a big machine that would spin really fast, and it had like kind of like the size of an incense stick coming out, and you would put diamond paste on it and bore out these airplane parts, like solid metal airplane parts, and make the holes bigger. You bore them out like that. So I did that job for like through the summer, and still hadn't joined the temple. But the devotees were saying, you can keep your... one reason I didn't want to join, because I was really attached to my dog. I didn't want to give him up, and he was a country dog. But the devotees were very kind. They said, Sri Govinda said, you can leave him. He can live in the temple. He can do service. He can guard the temple at night. And I was like, okay. And I would stay, overnight, time to time, and like that. So one day it was probably like July, August or September of 1973. I came to the temple, and there was, I come from a Kshatriya family. My father were all, like I said, Marines. And my father was a professional boxer in the Marine Corps. And he took me to karate classes and like that. So I came to the temple, and there was one devotee, my godbrother Pish Kanti, and he was also like a Kshatriya of the temple. So when I would come, we would immediately start fighting. We would spar and go down in the basement, and we'd have pretty heavy sessions fighting each other. One day I came, and he said, hey, Bhakti Tom, there's somebody here you have to meet. And I was like, okay, who is it? And he said, Kirtanananda Swami, he's from New Vrindavan. We have a big farm out in West Virginia. I said, okay. So I came into Kirtanananda Swami's room, and he was sitting like the picture of Lord Chaitanya, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was sitting with his danda like this. And Kirtananda Maharaj was just glowing like anything, and I just couldn't believe how effulgent he was. So I just naturally just started put my hands in my pocket and started handing him money without even saying a word. I was just giving him money. And so he asked me, what are you doing? I said, well, I want to be a devotee, but I have my dog, and I don't want to give him up. And, I really feel uncomfortable living in the temple with him because he's a country dog. He said, oh, well, come to New Vrindavan and bring your dog. And I was thinking, okay, well, that sounds very inviting, because I really want to surrender to, I really want to be a devotee, And I still had long hair and everything. So I was thinking about my future as a devotee, and I'm at work, and there were a lot of hippies in those days, so a lot of the workers had long hair, but you were supposed to tie your hair back. So when I sat down at my station to start working, I just forgot to tie my hair back or didn't care or whatever, but I was working and boring out these airplane parts, and my hair got caught in the machine, and this thing's really spinning hard. And bam! And it yanked my head down into the machine. And everybody, they hit this emergency button, stop it. And everybody, my boss, came running over, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I didn't feel any pain or anything, but there was a big bald spot right here. It ripped my hair out of my head. There was no blood, nothing, no pain. It was just like I was shaved up right here. So I went out in my car. My boss said, you could take the rest of the day off, So I'm in my car and I'm going, Krishna, this is a total sign. It's time to surrender to Krishna. So I went home and I told my parents that, and they knew I was going to the temple and stuff. And they were very, very, they didn't understand, but my parents were very special, very kind. My mother was actually in her own right very saintly. She never drank or smoked or did any of that things Americans do. And she was always a very classy lady and very kind. But when I told them I was going to join the temple, both my mother and father started to cry. And I said, don't worry. It's just like if I was becoming a Catholic priest, there's no difference. I'm just becoming a monk, Krishna monk. And they still didn't understand, but they were sad, So anyway, I went to the temple, and there were two wonderful devotees there. Ganapati Maharaj, who was still preaching in America. He's an amazing devotee. and Rida Prabhu, who's coming here today. And they shaved me up. And when I told them the story about what happened, they were laughing. So, so I was getting ready to go to New Vrindavan, and two devotees came, brothers, Jambavan and Yogesh Chandra. Jambavan was like 6'4", big man, and Yogesh Chandra was a little shorter, but big guy. So we talked to them, and now I'm shaved up and I have this long sika, and my dog was in the basement, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to New Vrindavan to surrender. I'm taking my dog there." And they had just gotten off a bus in Chicago. They were on their way to New Vrindavan. So they said, "We're going to New Vrindavan. Can we ride with you? That'll save us bus fare and everything." I said, "Yeah, sure. But you have to ride with me and my dog," you know. And they said, "Oh, what kind of dog is it?" And I said, "A Doberman Pinscher." And they were like, "Is he friendly?" Because Doberman Pinschers are fighter dogs, you know. I said, "Yeah, he's friendly if I tell him to be." So we went down in the basement and they met him, and it was all good. So the next morning we took off for New Vrindavan. And this is now November, early November of 73. So to make a long story short, we drove, actually it started, you leave Chicago, Illinois, and then you go into a state called Indiana. And when we got into like central Indiana, a snowstorm hit, you know, snow. It was a blizzard. The snow was piled up like a foot and a half. And their cars were stranded off the freeway, but Krishna was just pushing us through, you know. Plus we had a lot of weight in the car that probably helped. Jambavan, Yogesh Chandra, all of us, and Krishna just plowed through the whole state of Indiana all the way into Ohio. And we're going through Ohio and it's still snowing. And we got to like central Ohio, it started to let up a little bit. And then when you get through Ohio, you hit West Virginia, and New Vrindavan's close to the West Virginia-Ohio border. So Krishna was really amazing, you know. My car pulled up and made it right to Bahulaban, to the temple where Radha Vrindavan Chandra were. And it started to go, making all these noises, and blew up and never started again. And Jambavan and Yogesh Chandra, I remember he said, "You know, Bhaktivedanta, I think Krishna wants you to stay." So they had to tow that car out of their junket somewhere, you know. So I wound up staying through the winter in New Vrindavan and at the Brahmachari farm. Actually, Radhanath Swami was Pujari in the Brahmachari farm at that time. And I never really got to know him that well because he was always busy doing puja and everything. And my service was walking 2 miles to Bahulaban, which on this trail, which they called the Agasura Trail. It was a rough trail. And my service was helping one of my dearest godbrothers, Soma Prabhu, build a barn. We were building a barn. So anyway, the winter goes through. It was austere up at that farm too. You know, we had to shower. You had to go in this basement, and it was just a small room with a big garbage can, a metal garbage can, where they just threw wood in. There was no really any ventilation, so the room was always filled with smoke, and the floor was wet and sooty. And so I used to call it the dungeon. And I said, you know, I'm just going to go out to the creek out here. There's a little creek, and a lot of times it was frozen over, so you had to break the ice and pour water on this. So I would take a shower in that little creek instead of going into what I called the dungeon. But anyway, one day in March, it was late March, Kirtananda Swami came up to me and he said, "Bhaktitam, I have bad news for you." I said, "What is that, Maharaj?" He said, "Your dog is dead." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" And he said, some neighbor down the road said he was chasing his cows and he shot him. He said, "Come with me, we'll go retrieve his body." And Kirtananda Maharaj was very kind to me. You know, I'm still young, 18 years old, you know, so. Went down there and got his body, and like half his head was blown off. And that person didn't like devotees too much, so I don't think he was chasing his cows because he was dead on his driveway leading up to his house. But anyway, I knew in my heart it was Krishna's mercy, taking away my final attachment, you know, just took it away. So I told Kirtananda Maharaj, after staying, after a couple of days, he took me down, and I remember burying that dog by the old schoolhouse in Bahulaban there by the creek. But after a couple of days, I still had the taste for book distribution, because, not just the first night I went out, I did those books, but I continually would go out on Sankirtan with the devotees when I had long hair and everything. So I really had a taste for book distribution. So I asked Kirtananda Maharaj, I said, could I've been thinking about it, and I would really, now that my dog is gone, I would really like to go back to Chicago and distribute books. And he could see that I was sincere. But he said, first of all, well, if you stay just like another 2 months, you can get initiated here in New Vrindavan. And I said, I was thinking about it. Then in my mind, I was thinking, well, I can get initiated in Chicago too. So I said, that's nice, Maharaj, but I still want to go back to Chicago. So he was so kind, he paid my way back on the bus. So I went back to Chicago, and the rest was history. I was doing the airport in Chicago. We started off, we would go out in dhoti as brahmacharis, saffron, tilak, shaved up. And that was quite an experience. Then we went to regular clothes, and then we started to wear wigs like that. So that's basically how I became a devotee. And should I flow with it?
Yes.
So book distribution was really ecstatic, and I used to go out to mostly, I did some street Sankirtan, but I was a good book distributor, so they let me go to the airport mostly. And I love going to the airport. And so Srila Prabhupada was coming to Chicago in July of 1974. And I was hoping I would be initiated by then, but they were more strict at that time because it was a 74, and they wanted to make sure that you were going to stay, even though Sri Govinda had, great faith in me that I was a devotee and wouldn't leave. He still wanted me to wait. I said, yeah, but Srila Prabhupada's coming. Couldn't I get initiated when Prabhupada's here in July? He was coming for the first Chicago Ratha Yatra. And he said, well, maybe a couple months after that, So I had to wait till like November to get initiated, but it was still mercy. Srila Prabhupada came in 74 and was so ecstatic. And when Srila Prabhupada came this is the first time I saw him personally. I remember the United Airlines, and we could see his plane pulling up to the gate, because in those days you can go right to the gate. There was no security like there is today. And the plane was pulling up, and the excitement's building, and there's, like couple hundred devotees at least, because devotees would come from different temples, St. Louis, Detroit, different temples that weren't so far. And the kirtan is just building and building and building, and Prabhupada's coming, and the doors open up. Still, I didn't see Prabhupada. Everybody just paid their obeisances. And I got up, and there was Srila Prabhupada there, and I was like, it's just amazing to see him. And Srila Prabhupada had the ability to show you something in a room of devotees and give you some special mercy that no one else is even noticing what's going on. It was just so mystical being around Srila Prabhupada. It's the only word I can really use. He's Krishna's pure devotee, so it was like extraordinary being around in Srila Prabhupada's presence. I could see that Srila Prabhupada was effulgent like the sun to my eyes, and I could actually see other personalities around him. I couldn't see their physical features, but I knew there were other personalities there, like maybe Lord Brahma, who knows, demigods, I don't know. But it was just overwhelming to me. And then they had brought out an old umbrella we made Prabhupada a new Vyasasan. And the old Vyasasan had a big umbrella, like this. Big, heavy thing, with tassels hanging down. And it had a big conduit pipe that stretched all the way down like that, almost to the ground. And they didn't even think of cutting it or anything. And so Jagadish Prabhu was GBC, and he had that umbrella, and he stuck it in my hand, because, I was pretty strong, And he said, hold this over Prabhupada's head, So it's like, wow. So I'm holding this umbrella over Prabhupada's head, and it's really heavy, And I'm just looking at the back of Srila Prabhupada's transcendental head, you know, it's like amazingly effulgent. And then you can see it, actually Yadubara Prabhu was filming this whole scene. You could see it on the video, as somebody stepped on the back of my dhoti. And I lunged forward, and, you know, by all scientific gravity, science of gravity, I probably should have went over. But Krishna held me, you know, protecting his pure devotee. And Prabhupada kept walking and walking. And at some point, that long pipe, it kind of stretched like that. It was kind of bent. Somehow it touched the back of Prabhupada's dhoti. I don't think it even touched his leg, but it just like touched his dhoti. And in the middle, all this procession, devotees going crazy and kirtan, and Prabhupada stopped and he turned around and looked right at me in my eyes. And it was like so incredible. It was like, whew. Not like he was angry, and he was just giving me mercy. And when you come before the pure devotee in the caliber of Srila Prabhupada, he knew everything about you, and you could feel it, and you knew it. And then he turned and kept walking. Unfortunately, that part wasn't on the film, because Yadubara would have the camera running, and then he would shut it off and like run around the devotees to get a shot of Prabhupada in the front. I was talking to him about that recently. But anyway, so Prabhupada got in his car and went back to the temple. And that year we gave Prabhupada the whole Brahmachari ashram. He stayed in the temple. And it was a big building. It's old YMCA building. YMCA means it's a place where people go to work out with weights, and it had a big basketball court and a running track on top. But we converted it into a beautiful temple, Kishore. Actually, Kishore were here in Mumbai first, before Radharasa Bihari, and they were slated to stay here, but Prabhupada sent them to Chicago. And then Radharasa Bihari came here. It's an interesting story. So we gave Prabhupada the whole Brahmachari ashram. All the Brahmacharis were sleeping under the Rath cart, in vans, in the temple room, in the Prasadam hall, in different rooms, all over the temple, everywhere. And so Sri Govinda told me, he said, come back into the Brahmachari ashram, I want you to guard Srila Prabhupada's room. He gave him this one back room. But he had the whole ashram, many rooms back there, and plus there was a swimming pool. It was an old YMCA building, but there was no water in it. We used to store books in there and Rath cart parts and different things in there. Devotees would sleep in there and stuff. So he said, guard Srila Prabhupada's room, he's writing letters, and don't let anybody in if anybody comes back here. I said, okay. And he said, I have to go check on all the goings on, excuse me, because Rath Yatra was going on. He was temple president, so he had to go check, you know, make sure everything's running smoothly. So he left, but he said before he left, I'll never forget, he said, but Prabhupada, most likely he's not going to come out, you know, but make sure nobody goes in, Prabhu. I said, okay. I was still Bhakti Tam, make sure nobody goes in there. Yes. So he leaves, and it wasn't 20 seconds later, the door opens and Srila Prabhupada comes out. And I paid my obeisances, and Prabhupada walked way back into the back bathroom. It was like 8 showers back there, and, you know, toilets and all. It was an amazing facility, actually. It was a great temple. And then Prabhupada came back, and I was still on my knees like this outside of his door. And in one motion, Prabhupada came by and put his hand on my head and said, Hare Krishna, and went into his room like that. But when Srila Prabhupada did that, it was extraordinary, because he like shot Krishna Prem through my body. I won't describe it as an electrical thing, because that's like some cheap yogi kind of thing. But this was like, I was experiencing all these emotions, and my hairs are standing up right now. And for a few moments, Srila Prabhupada shot Krishna Consciousness in a very powerful way through my body. And I was there just kind of trembling, you know. And I don't know how long later it was, maybe 5 minutes. Sri Govinda came in to check on me, and when he turned the corner, I was standing there, and he looked at me, and he stopped, and he said, "Trana Karta." He said, "You're glowing." And I was trying to tell him, Prabhupada touched my head. And Sri Govinda is very tall, he's like 6'3". And he came up to me right over and he put his hand like this and he goes, "No, you're really glowing, Prabhu." And I said, "Prabhupada just touched my head." And he's like, "Wow." So that was my second encounter with Srila Prabhupada. First was the airport, and then this time. You know, and I know all the mercy that I had from Prabhupada, because was from book distribution, because I gave my young life to distribute his books, you know, in a very powerful way. You know, I'm writing a book now all about those days, and devotees who understand that distributing books in the O'Hare Airport, which Prabhupada called O Hare Krishna Airport, was extraordinary. So, you know, I have like 20 interviews of many of my godbrothers who were there at the time, great devotees, Vaishesika, Pragosh, Tripurari Maharaj, the list goes on and on. But there's a few more, like 4 or 5 more interviews that I'll get, and I'll be able to put the book together. So anyway, so it was a very powerful time of book distribution. So Srila Prabhupada, he only stayed a short time that time. He stayed maybe 3 days, I think. He came to Rath Yatra. And I will never forget Srila Prabhupada downtown Chicago, because we had to roll, we made the Rath Yatra cart. This one devotee, Bhaktivedanta, who's like my uninitiated godbrother, he was a carpenter. He did a lot of work around the temple. But he built that Rath cart basically single-handedly. You know, on my day off from the airport, I would help him a little bit, you know, but he was amazing. But I remember rolling that Rath cart down Clark Street, all the way from Evanston, which is North Chicago, all the way downtown. We had a police escort, like two cop cars, because it was in the middle of the night. We had to roll it all the way downtown. And I remember that thing creaking, because it was made out of wood, you know, making, I'm going, "Oh, Krishna, please make this, Prabhupada's going to sit on this, you know. Please make it sturdy, you know." We were praying for Prabhupada's safety. Of course, Krishna always has Prabhupada's safety. Anyway, so I'll never forget that when it was time for Prabhupada to get on the Rath cart, we forgot to bring a step ladder, because you had to step up for Prabhupada to get on. So devotees ran. Some devotees say they went to a hardware store and bought one, but there were no hardware stores downtown Chicago. I remember that they got a ladder from some janitor at one of the buildings downtown Chicago, and they brought it back. But I remember Srila Prabhupada, he never complained. He had to wait there for like 10, 15 minutes. He just sat there, he just stood there and chanted very softly, just observing the whole scene, you know. And he never, like, you know, got upset like some people, you know, "Where's my ladder?" you know. He was just so humble, you know. I'll never forget that. So Srila Prabhupada left, and then he came back in 75 the next year for Rath Yatra again, except this time he stayed for like 9 days, 8-9 days. And I was really ecstatic. I got to go on many morning walks. I kind of demanded it, because I was a Sankirtan book distributor. I said, "I'm going to go on the walks." Sri Govinda was very kind and let me go on walks, and there were some amazing walks with Prabhupada. I can tell you one time. It's a funny story. After the morning walk was over and Prabhupada was going to get in his car, and I was always, Sri Govinda would say, "You stay close to Prabhupada," because, you know, I was a Kshatriya of the temple. You know, like I could protect Prabhupada, right? But it was my seva, so stay by Prabhupada. So there must have been at least 10 sannyasis, if not 12 or 15 even. There were a lot of sannyasis, which are Dandas, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Vishnujan Maharaj, Brahmananda Swami, I mean, the list goes on. There were many sannyasis. And all of a sudden, this guy comes riding up on his bicycle, and Prabhupada would walk at Northwestern University. It's right on Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan's like an ocean. It's a huge lake. It connects all the Great Lakes and out into the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a beautiful ground, so Prabhupada really liked walking there. So anyway, this boy comes on a bicycle. He's, our age, like 20 at the time, whatever. And he slams on his brakes, and he looks right at Prabhupada and he says, "How come some of those guys are carrying sticks?" He's talking about the sannyasis and they're done this. And Prabhupada looked at Tamal Krishna Maharaj and he said, "What did he say?" And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "Prabhupada, he wants to know why we're carrying his sticks." And Prabhupada said, "Tell him to chase away dogs." All the devotees started laughing so hard. I mean, the devotees were roaring, laughing. And then Goswami, he told me, Goswami's Tamal Krishna Maharaj, we always affectionately called him Goswami. He said, "Invite that boy to the," and Prabhupada got in his car and was gone. He said, "Invite him to the temple." So I invited him to the temple. But it had a lot of meaning, Prabhupada saying that, right? Because sannyas means you're giving up this material world and you're chasing away the dogs of Maya, There's so many realizations you got from one comment by Srila Prabhupada. And so when Prabhupada came in to the airport in 75, we wanted Prabhupada to see us distributing books. And in those days, we started wearing regular clothes. Then we started wearing wigs because we can even distribute more books. So whatever we could do to distribute books, we did for Prabhupada. It didn't matter. I mean, there's so much that's why I'm writing this book. There's so much. But anyway, when Prabhupada came through, I had my wig on, and we wanted Prabhupada to see us doing books, and Vaishesika was there, Manasutta Prabhu, I think Magendra, I think Vaishesika was there, Kalki Prabhu, all these great souls. And but somebody stuck a mridanga on me and said, "Play the drum for Prabhupada." So I took my wig off, and there's a picture of it. Yadubar filmed that too. He was there. Yadubar was always filming. And so there's a nice pictures of me playing mridanga, and Prabhupada's coming, and one of them where he's looking at me and smiling. So there's nice pictures I'll be able to put in this book I'm trying to do. And that was really a special time. And so that was 1975. And there's more, but I'll skip ahead to 1976, the next time I saw Prabhupada. He didn't come to Chicago, but he went to Detroit, where we had purchased a Fisher Mansion, which was like a palace. Ambarish and I forget the Mataji's name, Lakeshore or something. Anyway, they bought this beautiful temple for Srila Prabhupada. It's a beautiful story. But anyway, I was getting second initiation, and we're in line to go into Prabhupada's room. There's 8 of us getting second initiation. So we're all in line. We go in one at a time. Prabhupada tells you the mantra. He puts the thread on your body. And in my mind, my small little mind, I'm thinking, Prabhupada, I'm his book distributor. He touched my head in Chicago. He gave me so much mercy in Chicago. I'm thinking Prabhupada's going to say something to me. And I'm thinking this in my mind, like puffed up, like I'm somebody special. So it's my turn to go in the room, and Prabhupada tells me the mantra, puts the thread on my body, and I'm sitting there waiting for Prabhupada to say something to me, and he just goes, I go, get out. Without saying a word, he just went. So I was like, Namo Vishnu Hudaya, out of that room. And then I was in the hallway, and I was thinking, what a fool you are, When I realized that Prabhupada did whatever he had to do at a certain time to make you humble, right? Because without being humble, Tranada Pi Sunichena Tor Pisnishna, we all know the verse. then it's impossible to be Krishna consciousness, right? It's impossible to move forward in Krishna consciousness. At the most, you're just spinning your wheels, if not going backwards. So it was a great lesson for me to learn that. And also during that time, if I can backtrack to 75, when the kirtan was going on, Srila Prabhupada was speaking on a Jamil, on the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I was learning to play mridanga fairly well. So Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana, and I wanted him to, for his pleasure, I wanted to play in the kirtan. So I grabbed my mridanga and I went to the kirtan to play, but all the big devotees, they said, no, you can't play, So I felt, really bad, I felt hurt, Anyway, so I put my drum away and I made my way back up close to Prabhupada, and he just looked at me and smiled, because he knew everything. It's not that he could even see what was going on, but he just knew everything about you when you were in his presence. Actually, George Harrison wrote one beautiful song about Srila Prabhupada, about that. How when you come in his presence, he knows your heart, So anyway, so that happened. So then finally, all the devotees had been to India in 74, 75 for the opening of Krishna Balaram Mandir, and I never got to go. So I was doing Sanskrit book distribution, mostly in the airport, at 73, when I went to New Vrindavan for those few months, but 74, 75, 76, almost 4 years, and I never got to go to India. So this is a long story. I won't tell you how I got to India. You can read about that. But I finally got to India, and I flew into Delhi, and I'm alone. And I went to the temple in Delhi, and Tejas, my godbrother Tejas Prabhu, was temple president. So I knocked on the door, and he opened the door, and I said, Haribol, just my first time to India. He said, well, Prabhupada's in Vrindavan right now. And I didn't know where Prabhupada was in the world at that time. And I said, Prabhupada's in Vrindavan? And he said, yeah, and it's only like, 3-hour train ride from here. So he helped me get a ticket, and I just went right to Vrindavan. And I got there, just before Sandhya Arti, for evening Arti. So the devotee said, lead kirtan, lead kirtan. And Prabhupada was in his room. So I led Sandhya Arti. And later, Hanksadutta Maharaj at the time, he told me, he said, Prabhupada heard me singing and playing the mridanga from his room. And he asked him, he said, who is that nice boy playing mridanga and singing? That's your book distributor from Chicago, Srila Prabhupada, Trana Karta. Prabhupada said, oh, very nice. Because he told me that the next day. But anyway, the next day, after Mangalartik, after Tulsi Puja, I was in front of Krishna Balaram Mandir, chanting japa. And at that time, of course, we were in the country. It's not all the hustle and bustle like today. You could actually hear the birds, the peacocks. And of course, there was no samadhi, So Hanksadutta, he came up to me and he said, Trana Karta, Prabhupada wants to see you in his room right now. And I said, I thought he was joking, right? And I said, don't joke around, it's not funny, Maharaj. He said, no, Prabhupada wants to see you right now, let's go. So I was like, okay. So I came in and Prabhupada was standing up and I paid my obeisances. And again, I was just on my knees looking up at him. He's so beautiful, Srila Prabhupada. And he's looking down at me and he said, you are playing mridanga very nicely. Where have you learned these things? And I said, from Kirtan, Srila Prabhupada, and from listening to tapes. And I said, it's all your mercy, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, Jai. And then he said something that took my heart. The shirt, I lost my heart in Vrindavan. Well, Prabhupada took my heart in Vrindavan because he looked down at me ever so lovingly, and he said, I remember you from America. And just, wow, I was just like amazed, because I'm just a foot soldier, I'm a foot soldier. Most of my godbrothers who were book distributors or never had much association with Prabhupada, So And then Prabhupada looked down, and his harmonium was there in a mridanga. And Harikesh Maharaj at the time was in the corner. He was recording. He had headphones and all his equipment. And Prabhupada looked at his harmonium and looked at the mridanga, and he said, "So you can play?" And I realized he meant, like, right now. And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." And I usually never tell this story, and I haven't told it. But lately I'm telling it because everything needs to be told. So Srila Prabhupada sat behind his harmonium, and Hanksaduta Maharaj gave me the drum, and usually devotees would ask me, what did Prabhupada sing? And I would say, I don't remember. Or Hare Krishna, I would say, But I remember exactly this first time. Prabhupada started to sing, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Vrindavan. And the whole room turned into Vaikuntha. It was just such an amazing experience. I mean, everything had personality, the tables, the chairs. Then the mridanga Prabhu's was really playing itself. I was just making the motions, but that mridanga had some like transcendental sounds that I never could get out of a drum before. And Prabhupada sang like that. And there were some other bhajans he sang that I don't remember, because actually he called me in his room a few times during those 3 months. I spent 3 months in Vrindavan with Prabhupada. September, October, November of 76. And then actually in December, Prabhupada came here to Mumbai. And Harisari asked me, he said, Trana Karta, you should come to Mumbai with us, And I said, well, because the Gita Gan, Gita Gan, it's a Bengali Bhagavad Gita. It was all the verses, like this, and like that thick. The Gita Gan had just come out in Bengal, and I had heard about it because we had a minibus in Vrindavan. So wherever Prabhupada went, if he'd go to a little village, we'd follow Prabhupada to that village and, hear him speak at a member's house or wherever, So it was a really wonderful time. We'd go all these different places. We'd follow Prabhupada. And so he would always be shedding mridanga mercy on me constantly. Like after he spoke at someone's house, he'd look at me and just go, like, lead kirtan, And one time, somehow or other, it must have been the first plastic mridanga, somehow got on our minibus. I don't know, it was an older minibus. It was Yasodanandan Swami, Dear Krishna, my godbrother, Riksharaj. It was it was all brahmacharis, like maybe 5 of us. And so this mridanga somehow got on the bus, and it wasn't like a balaram, balaram is just all plastic, but this one looked just like a clay drum, but all the straps were plastic. Its straps, all plastic, except the heads were leather, So I had the drum next to me, and Prabhupada was speaking at this person's home, and he's finished speaking. He looked at me and went, what do you always do? So I picked up this plastic mridanga, and I started playing, and we're all standing up now, and Prabhupada saw that plastic mridanga, and his eyes were just fixed on that mridanga. He didn't take his eyes off it the whole kirtan, and he's just watching me play this drum. So after the little kirtan, whatever it was, 10, 15 minutes, Prabhupada called me over, and he said, this is plastic mridanga? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, where did it come from? And I said, Srila Prabhupada, please forgive me. I'm not sure where it came from. It was just on our minibus. And he said, oh, you like it? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. I said, the big end is okay, but the little end doesn't have much like that. And he went like, but he was so interested in that drum. And then later I realized that he wanted those plastic mridangas for the West, because if you broke a clay drum in America, that was it. There was no more mridanga. So the idea of having these balaram mridangas was very keen. Srila Prabhupada wanted that. And also in Vrindavan, when Srila Prabhupada would give Bhagavatam class, I would play mridanga for him when he sang Jaya Radha Madhava. And to see Srila Prabhupada sing Jaya Radha Madhava Prabhu's was the perfection of life. I see it like that. It was just so incredible to see Srila Prabhupada sing Jai Radha Madhava. So I would play for him every morning. No one would actually touch the drum because they knew they were in it. But one morning, Hansaduta Maharaj, at the time he was Hansaduta Maharaj, and he was a GBC, he was a big preacher, kirtan leader. You know, he was actually very nice to me in Vrindavan. I'll never forget how nice he was. And he asked me one morning before Prabhupada had come in to give class, and he said, I want to play Mridanga for Prabhupada this morning when he sings Jai Radha Madhava. You know, I'm a brahmachari. I said, yes, Maharaj, you know, please play, you know. So Prabhupada came in and he sat down and he sang one line, Jai Radha Madhava, with his eyes closed. And Hansaduta was playing. And Prabhupada opened his eyes and he went, just give me the drum. And I'll never forget being kind of embarrassed, you know. So I had to play like that. So Prabhupada just was constantly shedding this Mridanga mercy on me. And you remember what happened in Chicago, they wouldn't let me play. And now all of a sudden the next year, Prabhupada is just like dousing me with all this mercy. So anyways, so Srila Prabhupada's coming here to Mumbai. This is December. Well, first let me say this. When you know, in Vrindavan, we were able to go on all the morning walks with Prabhupada. Sometimes he would come out and just go through the gate and turn towards Loi Bazaar and walk, and we'd all walk. And other things happened. And one time I got to ride in Prabhupada's car with the tilak with him. And we went out the gate and turned right, and he made the driver drive like a few minutes. And he told him to stop, and he got out of the car, and Prabhupada would just walk through the forest of Vrindavan, and we just follow. There'd be like two of us with Prabhupada. So anyway, so Srila Prabhupada's coming here, and I'm going to Calcutta because I want to distribute his books. I could have came here. And in my mind, I'm thinking it'd be a greater service. So I'm in Calcutta, and I was doing huge. I was doing 100 Gita Gans every day. I would go down to Shelda Station and Hara Station and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. And, you know, being a brahmachari, if a businessman didn't give a donation, I would get on my knees and I would say, please, it's for my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And they would be so embarrassed. Almost every time they'd give me some rupees and I'd give them a book, you know. And then Prabhupada went from Mumbai to Kumbh Mela in January of 1977. And I'm still doing books, so I've been in Calcutta like a month and a half doing Gita Gans. And there was an announcement in the temple that Srila Prabhupada's coming to Calcutta from Kumbh Mela, and I was so happy. I was so excited. I'm going to see Prabhupada again. And when Prabhupada's car pulled up in front of the temple on Albert Road, there were no clouds in the skies, Prabhu. When Prabhupada got out of the car, some rain, like mist, came on Prabhupada. And I remember Prabhupada looking up and saying, oh, very auspicious, he said. And I was standing just like from here to that chair. I could hear him say that. And there was only like 10 or 15 devotees. So Prabhupada saw me in the crowd and he made a beeline right at me, and he's standing right in front of me. And he looks at me and he says, so now you are here? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. But he knew, you know, Prabhupada knew everything. He's just giving me a little more mercy. But one of my godbrothers happened to be in Calcutta, Jai Sachinandan, and he sang, even Prabhupada commented on his kirtan that he sang just like a Bengali, so beautiful. He led amazing kirtans. And we just had special mridangas made from Satish Chandra. He was the mridanga wala in Calcutta at the time. And all the straps were a little thicker, the clay was a little thicker, even the little straps that go around this way were a little thicker, the heads were a little thicker, the drums were amazing drums. It's like boom, ding, ding, ding. They were so beautiful sounding, you know. So Jai Sachinanda started to sing, and we're both playing our new drums, and Prabhupada goes up into the temple room in Calcutta, and he's sitting on his Vyasasana, and the kirtan is just, and there was only like 15 devotees there. And the kirtan is just taking off, like Krishna was just really blessing us, you know. And Prabhupada was playing the kartals, and he was bouncing on the Vyasasana. He was enjoying it so much. So that night we went into Prabhupada's room, me and Jai Satchidananda together, and we paid our obeisance and got up and we looked at Prabhupada. His eyes were like this big. And he said, "Your combined kirtan is very wonderful, Prabhupada." He's still blessing me. So that's what happened when I first saw Prabhupada in Calcutta. And I kept doing his books, you know, and Hare Prabhu was Prabhupada's servant at the time. You know, he was very kind, you know, Hare. And sometimes he would let me sit in Prabhupada's room alone with Prabhupada. Prabhupada would be writing, and I would just sit there and softly chant, you know, very soft on my beads, you know, and just be with Prabhupada alone, you know. So one time I was learning a few extra beats from this Bengali Mridanga teacher. And he chewed pan, you know, his mouth was like a lot of pan. His mouth was red like he couldn't believe, you know. And so I asked Srila Prabhupada one day when I was in his room alone, I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I've been taking some Mridanga lessons from this man, and he would like to meet you. Would it be okay?" He said, "Bengali, would you meet him, Prabhupada?" Prabhupada said, "Yes." You know. So we made some arrangements. He came the next day, or maybe the day after, I don't remember, but he came. And they were speaking in Bengali, and I'll never forget how they were conversing, and I couldn't understand it, but just to be in that room and to see Prabhupada talk to his fellow Calcutta person, you know, was really wonderful. So, you know, I got a lot of mercy like that from Prabhupada. And one time I was in Prabhupada's room with him, and these two Sanskrit, you know, professors or Indians came, and they were, you know, Sanskrit Babas, you know, and they were talking with Prabhupada in Bengali, and again I'm just sitting there, and they looked at me and they asked me my name, and I told them my name, Trana Karta, which is actually one of the 108 names of Mahaprabhu. Trana, you know, Samsara Dava Nana Lita Loka Tranaya. Trana means the deliverer. So, and Karta in the Gita is the doer, it says. So one of them said, just like that, he said the deliverer and the doer, and one of them said, yes, and also means protector. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, acha, like acha. Because really, my service at the airport was to deliver books to people and protect the devotees. So, I mean, amazing things happen at that airport. Hopefully you'll be able to read about. So those were beautiful exchanges with Srila Prabhupada. And then it's a famous thing, Srila Prabhupada's health was at that time starting to go down a little. And they were going to Bhubaneswar to try to get Prabhupada by the ocean and some ocean air. And so Hare said, you should come to Bhubaneswar. And it's a famous story, you can read about it in Lilamrita. Prabhupada in Bhubaneswar in 1977. And again, Hare said, come to Bhubaneswar. I said, I just wanted to distribute Prabhupada's books. That was like my thing. I just wanted to sell Prabhupada's books. I said, I'm just going to stay in Calcutta, and distribute Prabhupada's books. So I did that. And actually, Hare when I see him, he'll probably remind me again, you should have came to Bhubaneswar. But I do wish I would have went, because it was actually, those times in Calcutta was actually the last real intimate times I spent with Srila Prabhupada. Because, the Mayapur festival was coming up, and so many devotees were coming. And then, of course, in the end of 77, Srila Prabhupada finished his pastimes here. And I had gone back to Chicago. And, Prabhupada wanted all of us to be in Vrindavan with him, but it was a monetary thing, a money thing. They wouldn't let us go back, and I was so sad, Which quality of Prabhupada impressed me most? Well, there's 26 qualities of a devotee that mentioned in second canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. But the quality that impressed me most of Srila Prabhupada was his, I'd have to say two, were his kindness and his compassion. He was so kind, Srila Prabhupada. And everything was for your advancement in Krishna consciousness. Getting on the Jaladuta, was part of his kindness, right? Coming to America to preach in such a hellish place after being in Vrindavan, that was his kindness. Taking us as his disciples, that was his kindness. And how he had compassion and love for all of us, not just like, but of course for his disciples, he loved us so much, but for every living entity, for the ants, for the birds, the bees, the flowers and the trees. And like this, that was Srila Prabhupada, Krishna's pure devotee. It's hard to imagine, but those two qualities impressed me the most. Hare Krishna.